Dear Party President, dear Joseph, dear friends, today's Congress has two ideas. First is about to define our ideas for the future of our continent, of the European Union. And the second big pillar today is to be in Valletta in Malta to support Simon Busuttil and our party here for the campaign in a few months. We wish Simon all the best, and I tell you a secret, because in the EPP Group in the Parliament we have a secret plan. After Andrej Plenković's victory in Croatia, the first time a former member of the European Parliament became Prime Minister. When Simon Busuttil can achieve this, and I'm sure he will do, then we establish a working group in the European Council of former members of the European Parliament. This is our secret, dear friends, so our secret plan. The EPP Group is a driving force of the European Parliament. We are united and we are successful. And Tono already mentioned one of the biggest successes during the last weeks. Despite the socialists breaking their promises, dear friends, we elected Antonio Tajani as President of the European Parliament with an overwhelming majority. Congratulations to Antonio Tajani again. More important is what we are doing for the people. I don't want to bother you about the detailed regulations we have on the table for fight against terror, for the question of stop illegal migration, for the Juncker plan, for more investments, for climate change, fight against climate change, for our farmers, and a lot of thousands of details. We are doing simply our job. The EPP Group is the stable anchor in the European Parliament, and that is not a coincidence. 260 members from 27 member states, dear friend. I have to say, this is diversity when you look at these figures. But we are voting together at over 95% of all votes in the Parliament. The EPP is not only the biggest group in the Parliament, we are, when it comes to the vote, the most united group in the European Parliament. I am very proud to be the group leader of such a strong team. Thanks for all who contributed to this unity. Dear friends, we feel it. We are standing at an historic crossroad. How will Europe continue? And above all, how do we convince the people to walk this way with us? I try to give an answer. Firstly, I directly want to continue what Mariana Rajoy said. If we want to convince people, dear friends, then we must stop all these crisis talks which we do every day. Dear friends, of course, we are facing a lot of challenges, and I am not naive about the importance and about what we are facing in the future. But dear friends, when I compare today's challenges with the challenges of the founding fathers of the European Union, I think nobody can say that our challenges are bigger than those 60 years ago. That's why every political generation had his challenges. We have to simply work on this. And Europe was never the promise that we can live without problems. But Europe was always the promise that we can solve the problems better together, dear friends. You're aware about the successes which we had managed in the last decades. I only want to remind again on one very fundamental thing, which we always have to talk about. I am 44 years old. Dear friends, I am the first generation on this continent who can say that I live on the whole continent in peace and freedom. I am the first generation who can say this, dear friends. The generation of my father lived in a split Europe, where half of our continent, of the Europeans, were locked up behind the Iron Curtain. And the generation of our grandfathers lived always in war over centuries. Again, I am the first generation on this continent who can say that we live all over Europe in peace and freedom. And having this in mind, dear friend, don't tell me that Europe is not a success story. Let's be proud about what we achieved during the last decades. Secondly, dear friends, we must assume responsibility. What do I mean with this? In Brussels, no regulation and no directive is adopted without the approval of the Member States and the European Parliament. The approval rates of the ministers are outstandingly high. The French government, for example, has voted yes in 192 out of 193 votes in the last 2.5 years. Portugal has an approval rate of 98%. Polish government is voting 9 times yes out of 10 times, dear friends. That is the reality. And then a miracle happens. Once they have landed at home, they start complaining about how bad Europe is. When you see this, dear friends, how shall the people gain trust in our European project if all those who bear responsibility in Europe would explain to the European people what we are doing there and how important it is for them? Then we would have no problem with the support of the people of Europe in our project. Dear friend, let's assume responsibility. Thirdly, we are politicians and not diplomats. That means we must speak plainly. We must tell people what we think, what we do. And let me use 2 examples for this. Take Turkey. The statements of President Erdogan are unacceptable. Turkey is clearly moving away from Europeans' values. As this is the case, Europe cannot only simply continue like nothing has happened. I think Turkey cannot become member of the European Union. We want to have a close partnership with Turkey, dear friends, but not a full membership. Europe is not limitless. And the people in Paris, in Amsterdam and in Budapest expecting from us that we do not overstretch the European Union. Clear messages that people understand what we want. And I share with you a second example about Brexit. Yesterday's decision, the decision of people, and yesterday's triggering of Article 50. A historic mistake, and a lot of partners are telling now we try to reduce the damage, but I have to say this decision will create a lot of damage from both sides. One thing is clear. Someone who leaves the European Union is losing, dear friends, the advantages of this club. And that's why one message is clear to London. We will not allow anymore the cherry-picking approach which we saw in the last decades. At the fourth point, let's talk about identity. What about our national pride and about Europe? Le Pen, Strache, Wilders, all the populists tell the people that we want to go back to nationalism. And they say, to hell with this Europe. They want to drive a wedge between the fatherlands and Europe. And I say, what a nonsense. I'm a proud Bavarian. Dear friends, Bavaria is my home to me. I'm a German citizen with a German passport with a national identity. And I am also a convinced European with all my heart. And no populist will ever be able to tell me that this would be a contradiction. Whoever loves his fatherland, dear friend, says yes to a strong Europe. And finally, we need emotions when we talk about Europe. It's not a technical project, it's about emotion. It's so wonderful to be an European, about the diversity of our continent, the languages, the towns, the landscapes, the culture, the art. Dear friends, when you listen to names like Da Vinci, like Mozart, like Smetana, like Chopin, they belong to all of us together. And then there is our soil. When you get a plane in Dublin and fly to Athens, when you start in Lisbon and fly to Riga, then you crossed 2 times the European continent. And you will see a lot of diversity. But you see also one thing which is in common all over Europe. In every center of a village and of a town you're flying through, you will see in the middle a Christian church. Christianity is engraved in the DNA of our continent. Christianity is the soul of Europe, just like Pope Francis told us last Friday. And we as EPP, we are proud of this. So stop talking about crisis. Talk about our successes. Take over responsibility, and finally, let's be proud of our national and European identity and about our Christian roots. The European integration is the only way to defend the European way of life in a globalized world, dear friends. The coming years will be decisive. In a sea of populism from left and right, the EPP will be the key player. Challenging times, let us begin.